Let me start with the bios. So, Chinasa Uwanna is a senior associate in intellectual property law, technology, media, and entertainment practice group of the Nigerian law firm Banwo in Ighodalo. She has excellent experience in the field and has advised in numerous local as well as cross-border and multi-jurisdictional transactions involving foreign registration, transfer, commercialization, protection, and enforcement, particularly in Nigeria and other African jurisdictions. She also advises business owners on regulatory issues, in particular reference to their IP rights. In addition, her experience cuts across corporate and commercial law transactions, consistently ranked as an expert in the field of IP in Nigeria by Chambers Global Guide, and more recently, World Trademark Review, WTR 1000, World Intellectual Property Review, and Managing Intellectual Property IP Stars. Chinasa is an author and regular speaker on IP and ancillary issues. She is an active member of many local and international IP associations, including Pharmaceutical Trade Group, International Association for Protection of Intellectual Property, the Counterfeiting Collaboration Nigeria, Intellectual Property Committee of Nigerian Bar Association, section of business on business law, the Nigerian International Franchise Association, amongst others, as well as the faculty member of the African Franchise Institute. Chinasa has also served on several committees of the International Trademark Association, including the Africa, Middle East, and South Asia Anti-Counterfeiting Subcommittee and Trademarks Reporter Committee. She's also the Nigerian chapter contributor of INTA Country Guides on Trademarks, as well as contributor to the Future Africa Forum on Development and Industrialization Issues. She has a master's degree in IP law from the University of Turin. So Chinasa will be in conversation with her colleague, Temiloluwa Ibidapo-Obe. Temiloluwa is an associate in intellectual property, technology, media, and entertainment practice group of Banwo and Ighodalo also, a leading commercial law firm in Nigeria, Lagos. She is an exceptional team player who enjoys providing engineering solutions to problems. Her expertise cuts across intellectual property, technology, and media entertainment, specifically in areas of copyright, trademark, patents and designs, infringement and passing off actions, anti-counterfeiting, copyright, and trademark litigation and regulatory compliance. She represents and has successfully advised several clients on a wide range of intellectual property matters, including Asus PLC, Katy Perry, and the Arsenal Football Club of Gunners. Currently, she represents Rural Trade Limited Liability Company, which is owned by multi-award winning artist Rihanna Robin Fenty in numerous trademark opposition matters. She also played an active role as a member of the team that drafted a position paper for the use of the Presidential Task Team set up by the Federal Ministry of Information and Culture for the establishment of an audience measurement system in Nigeria. Temiloluwa currently represents Formula One licensing BV, the highest class on single-stage auto racing, with its branding, trademark registration, and protection in Nigeria. She recently advised the company in relation to its institution of non-use cancellation action against two identical trademark registrations by adverse parties. In the media and entertainment space, she routinely provides legal advisory services to clients including Dakori Egusin Akonde, Zik Zulu, and Manish Shomoye in respect to her online storytelling platform, Storytellers, which is focused on knowledge, insight, and conversations that will further build and grow forms of storytelling in Africa. Currently, she has represented DJ Spinel, Mansour Ahmadi, and she is a member of the team that provides legal advice production company led by Jade Siveru for the gangs of Lagos. Temiloluwa is an active team member of the media entertainment teams and was instrumental to the organization of the event titled An Evening with Creatives, Investors, and Regulators, which is held to officially unveil the media entertainment team under the intellectual property practice group of the firm. She has also been actively involved in planning and organization of several events for the team, including the World IP Day 2021 event with the team IP and SMEs. Taking Your Idea Market, which had over 200 entrepreneurs and business startups in attendance. She has a keen eye for detail and is currently the editor-in-chief of the publication desk of the team. She is responsible for the production of several articles, locally and internationally by members of the team. She belongs to a number of IP associations and groups, including the Intellectual Property Lawyers Association of Nigeria and the Anti-Counterfeiting Collaboration of Nigeria. So that's like a whole of I just read there, the introduction. Well, it's to be expected when you have two top lawyers as a facilitator. So at this point, I would hand over the control of the event to Chinasa. And so in 45 minutes, we'll be back ahead with our questions. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Innocent, and good evening, everyone. Well, good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on where you're joining from. It's a pleasure to be here, and without much ado, I would go into the business for the day. I'd like to share my screen, so just some minutes, please. Excuse me. Oops. Okay, please can you confirm if you can see my screen?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Great. So today we'll be speaking on law and the creative economy, right? And like Innocent said, I'll be taking this topic with my colleague, Temilola Ibidapo-Obe. This is just a quick overview of some of the things I'll be talking about. Well, with particular focus to Nigeria, because that's where we have expertise. So there'll be a brief introduction. We would briefly discuss the regulatory framework, some of the challenges being faced by the industry or by creatives in Nigeria, some of the opportunities that are available, and the need for legal representation, why it's very important, and then would have like a conclusion, and it'll be open for comments and questions. Just looking at this slide, I deliberately just put these pictures together. We have the Mona Lisa by Da Vinci. We have the picture of Beyonce and Burna Boy, who collaborated on the music. Netflix, the movie Fatherhood with Kevin Hart, and the Gucci bags and shoes and all that. I mean, and there are so many more things that could be represented here, but it's just to give an idea or set the tone for discussion this afternoon. And so the creative industry, this is just a slide that basically just gives some statistics. Again, still setting the tone for the conversation I want to have this afternoon. When we talk about creative economy, the creative industry, or creatives, what comes to mind? And I've just put like a very simple definition. It's the sum total of the individuals and mass media companies involved in the manufacture and distribution of mass media, entertainment, and creative artworks, and generally things that have been born out of some creativity. It includes music, film, dance, theater, the performing arts, visual arts, fashion, television, radio, print, that's media, and so on. Needless to say, it's a billion-dollar industry. Like I mentioned about statistics, I have two main sources here, and I mean, subsequently, when the slides will be shared, I can also include the sources or the links to the actual sources. From Joberman, Joberman says the creative industry is positioned as Nigeria's second largest employer and has the potential to produce 2.7 million jobs by 2020. It says the creative industry employs 4.2 million people across 5 different sectors identified under the creative industry or creative space. And then the PricewaterhouseCoopers says, based on a report they called Insights from the Entertainment and Media Outlook 2019 to 2023 from an African perspective, that the Nigerian entertainment and media revenue reached about 4.5 billion in 2018, will rise to about 10.8 billion in 2023, and in 2023 will be nearly 2.5 times the revenue that it was in 2018, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of information, a lot of statistics out there about the creative industry. And most times, people focus on just music and movie, but it goes far beyond that. I mean, the Nigerian fashion industry is now something to reckon with. For instance, dance, art, advertising, it's not just even the visual arts, which is gradually getting more and more momentum in the country. It's beyond just movies, and I mean, I know that we have Nollywood in Nigeria, which is a very, very big deal, and there's also more and more the big companies look towards Africa and towards Nigeria. Netflix since 2018 has commissioned a lot of Nigerian movies, starting with Genevieve Naji's Lionheart, and up till now where there's so many more. Universal Studios looking at doing things and all that in the country. Beyond that, like we said, it's much more than just movie and film. So I'll just quickly look at the regulatory framework, for the space. As we know, or we probably know, literary, artistic works, cinematographic works, and so on, the performance rights like broadcasting, recording, and all that are mostly the subject of intellectual property, or are mostly born out from intellectual property, because, like we said, intellectual property is about the creative, works that people come up with, everything that has come from the human intellect, whether it's in the literary space, artistic space, or whatever, would qualify for intellectual property protection. And so IP laws are mostly, what regulates the creative space. In this case, I mean, in the case of Nigeria, there will be legislation, things like laws that have been, established by the country or by Act of National Assembly or the Senate, as the case may be, or international treaties. So in our own case, the major laws are Copyright Act, the Trademarks Act, Patents and Designs Act, and of course, international conventions like the Berne Convention that deals with copyright protection and all that. I would say that of all the intellectual property rights, trademarks, patents, designs, and so on, it would appear that things like copyright and trademarks are the most relevant IPR to creatives, particularly in the art space. There are other applicable laws, which include things like the Companies and Allied Matters Act, Companies Income Tax Act, various tax laws, obviously the Constitution of the Republic of Nigeria, and so on. And why it's important to note these other laws, and as we go on, we'll talk about this further, is because, again, just like I was talking about people focusing mostly on music and film, when you talk about creativity or creatives, when it comes to the creatives as well, most people just feel that, the only thing they need to know about or be aware of are the intellectual property laws. But there are so many relationships, there are so many engagements that you could have in the space that go beyond just knowing what your intellectual property rights are and knowing the laws that govern them and how to protect your rights and all of that. Beyond all of those laws, there are laws that deal with, setting up your company, building your business, how you paying relevant tax, employing staff, remuneration, privacy, how you deal with privacy and issues like that, and so on and so forth. So it's important to know that, yes, intellectual property legislation or laws and treaties are relevant, in the space, but beyond those laws, there are other laws that govern the various relationships, that you can find in the creative space. And then apart from, legislation and all that, there's contracts, and contracts, I think, is one of the major or the main thing, because whether or not you are aware of and you take into cognizance, the IP laws that may be in existence and all of that, there would always be legally binding agreements between at least two people that define their relationships, their rights and responsibilities, duties, obligations, and all of that to the contract. And that is what you find mostly in the space. So who is going to, I want to do like an exhibition, I would have to hire a hall for my exhibition or pay some people to come. I need to buy pay for different services. I need to buy certain things I will use to, carry out what I want to do. I mean, whether it's in the field of art or even if it's in, let's say, in the movie industry or something like that, there are a whole lot of agreements, influencer agreements, performance agreements, and so on and so forth that one would deal with. I was discussing with someone recently, and we're going through all the agreements that you would look at or you have in the creative space. And before 5 minutes, we had gotten about 30 or 40 different types of agreements, licensing agreements, and so on and so forth. I just made a note here that it's important to note when you're entering into different agreements, the difference between assigning rights and licensing rights, because in the creative space, you would always have, maybe if you have a merchandising agreement, for instance, or someone has engaged your services to come and perform or to produce certain works and things like that, you need to be certain whether you are getting into a sale, an assignment, or a license, or whatever. And we will discuss this further down. But just to give a general overview of what the regulatory framework is like. There are a number of challenges, right, that would typically come up when you're dealing with parties in the creative space. And I mean, based on experience and all of that, and in particular, based on our experience in Nigeria, I would say that the major challenge that we typically face is the issue of inadequate, or first of all, lack of inadequate, unfavorable, or even purely outdated laws. People say that in Nigeria we have so many laws, but when you look at some of these laws, you realize that some of them are not adequate to deal with the issues. So for instance, in the wake of artificial intelligence, digital technology, and so on, there are a lot of issues that have come up, So for instance, when you're even talking about where a painting, for instance, is made from artificial intelligence, and issues about who actually did the painting. Is it the individual or is it technology that produced the painting, and all of that? We don't have laws in Nigeria yet that cover such issues, right? And I don't know about other jurisdictions anyway. And that's even something more technical. For us, we're still dealing with a lot of even things that other jurisdictions have gone beyond. So, for instance, most of our laws are laws that, most of our IP laws are laws that were, established or promulgated since 1960s and things like that. So they are not able to deal with present day realities. Some of the laws are inadequate in the sense that there are some relevant provisions that should be there that are not there, or that outright unfavorable. When you look at some of the regulations that have been put in place by the government or by the government. So for instance, the issue of broadcasting in Nigeria and concerns about whether government is looking at, regulating broadcasting and all of that. The lack of structure, it's a developing thing. Whilst people are becoming more and more aware of intellectual property rights, and the laws governing them in the country, there's still need for a more, structured way or approach in dealing with these issues. So it's more or less like everyone just does what they want to do, as long as, okay, I'm not going against any law per se. That we don't really have a lot of structured organizations, for instance, and well organized means of achieving the aim for different stakeholders in the industry. So for something like Nollywood, for instance, we have the performance, the PMAN, the association for them. We have some collecting societies for instance, and because we had COSON, Copyright Society of Nigeria, and then Musical Copyright Society of Nigeria, MCSN, and all that. But then there have been all sorts of arguments and court cases and litigation over who has the rights, the proper license from the Nigerian Copyright Commission to be able to act as a collecting society in the country, and so on and so forth. So we have so many issues that still need to be sorted out. Another major challenge that is being faced in the industry is where little or no access to finance. We know about the CBN fund. My colleague will talk about that subsequently, but it's been a very tough and difficult thing for a lot of players in the industry to access finance. I also think somebody had spoken about this earlier in previous meetings. It's difficult in a country like Nigeria, where we're dealing with corruption, dealing with poverty, and dealing with a lot of other issues, for people to sit down and actually appreciate the arts, or even have look towards investing in art and all of that. For the most part, you find that it's people that are more exposed, or that have that are more exposed basically, and have access to personal funds or funds from other investments, that are able to do so. So financing the arts, financing the creative has been a major problem in the country. There's also the issue of piracy, counterfeiting, and so on, inadequate protection of IP rights in Nigeria. Whilst we have some laws, I've already mentioned like our IP laws, trademark laws, patent laws, and things like that, there's still a major issue of piracy, and all that in the country. You find out that even where there are not adequate sanctions or deterrents in our laws, and even when they are, they are not, even when there are some sanctions, those sanctions are just for peanuts and all that. So a pirate who is making so much money from, would rather go and pay the fine and continue with his or her business than not continue. There's not sufficient deterrent per se. Again, we don't have very reliable data, which is tied into not being very having a sufficient technology advancement and all that in the country. So it's difficult to even know what's going on, to be able to capture the main issues in terms of what's going on in the creative space. I was able to give a bit of data because of PwC's activities and Gerberman and all that, but we need more and more of these things out there. Some time ago, we were working on something on audience measurement in the country, and it was difficult to gain just simple data on the various issues that we wanted to deal with and speak to. And that's a real problem in the space. And then again, limited value capture or opportunity. So, I would say this ties into every other thing that I've mentioned in terms of the law, in terms of structure, access to finance, protection of the IP rights and all of that, so that it's difficult for people to see the opportunities in the space. Moving on, I would hand over to Temilola to talk about some of the opportunities that we have.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Temilola Ighodalo, like Chinasa mentioned. So I'll just take over from where she stopped. So there are a few opportunities that creatives can actually tap into in relation to their IP rights. They can exploit IP rights. Exploited IP rights necessarily means that creatives can. Exploiting IP rights means that creatives can license, for example, can license their IP rights, for example, their trademarks or some of their other IP rights to be able to get like monetary reward, or to be able to maximize their profits. They can assign their IP rights. So what assignment does is that you basically sell off or you give off the whole of your IP rights to somebody. But what this does is that basically you're collecting money, but you don't have any rights to the IP anymore. So the new buyer basically becomes the owner of the IP rights. Creatives can also look into franchising. So what franchising does is that you are basically going into an agreement with someone. Sorry, I think there's an echo somewhere. Okay. So what franchising does is that you basically go into an agreement with someone to say that I can allow you use my IP for a particular, I can allow you use my IP for a period. You're using my trademark, you're using my name, you're using my brand, you're using my logo. Everything that I'm doing is going to be in relation to what you also what you're going to operate in another branch. For example, KFC has a franchise. It's like KFC in many parts of the world, including Nigeria. So basically what obtains in the branch in Yaba is also going to operate in a branch in VI. So what this does is that the owner of the franchise basically gets money from franchising it to another person that's franchisee, and then basically the owner of that right, and the owner of the trademark, that the KFC person has made money and exploited the IP rights. Creatives can also look into joint ventures. So like that's like strategic agreements with people to say that, okay, I have, for example, I have the trademark, I have the logo, my brand has attained a lot of recognition. You have the money, you have the capital, we can come together to start like a business or something. So basically in return, in the end, you guys come together to start a business, start a company, and it basically benefits both parties. You can, creators can also look into merchandising. For example, Rihanna has, she's a musician, she sings, she has a beauty line, and then she can just, even now we know that she has like, there's like Fenty Beauty, people have like shirts, face caps, and different things, bags, handbags, and all of that, just have the brand in there. Basically by doing this, by merchandising, by having her logo or her name on all these things basically brings money for her. So that's another way that people that have trademarks or other IP rights can tap into exploiting their IP rights. It can also be sale through sale. So basically, just basically saying, okay, this my trademark or my copyright or any other IP rights, basically just saying, okay, I'm selling it off to somebody, and then that's still a way of exploiting. I know many people might want to look into this because it basically doesn't give the owner any rights to it again. So once you sell it off, then you don't have any rights to it again, and the person that you're selling off now becomes the owner. So there's also the opportunity that was created by the CBN in 2019, I guess, the Creative Industry Financing Initiative, CIFI fund. So Chinasa, can you go to the next slide? Okay, so basically, yes, discussions now are growing on how best for creatives to harness and support the potentials in the creative economy, using firstly the law as a mechanism, while at the same time fueling the economy's access to finance. So as we've seen, as Chinasa has explained, access to finance is a major issue that creatives face currently. So as part of the efforts to boost job creation, particularly amongst Nigerian youth, the Central Bank of Nigeria, in collaboration with the Bankers Committee, established the Creative Industry Financing Initiative in May 2019. So what the CIFI fund, which I will be using, was basically created to do was to improve access to long-term, low-cost and sustainable financing for entrepreneurs and investors in the creative and information technology subsectors of the Nigerian economy. This particular fund concentrates on just 4 subsectors: fashion, information technology, movie, and music. So here, creatives can obtain a loan ranging from 3 million to 500 million. 3 million, 500 million, depending on the area in which you fall under, the subsector you fall under. Because even under the movie, there's a section for movie production and movie distribution. So basically, the loan range of between 3 million and 500 million depends on whether I fall under IT, whether I fall under movie, whether I fall under music or the fashion subsectors. And then all commercial and microfinance banks in Nigeria currently are licensed by the CBN, can operate under this, can basically issue this fund. And then there's an interest rate of 9% per annum, which is all inclusive. And then it is between a repayment period of 3 to 10 years. So like I mentioned before, depending on the subsector you fall under or subsector you want to obtain a loan under, there's a repayment period of between 3 to 10 years. And then the establishment of the CIFI and release of its implementation framework could provide the much needed incentives for maximally unlocking the potential of the country's burgeoning youthful population and harnessing same for the targeted growth in the Nigerian creative economy. So basically what the CBN was trying to do with this is that, I mean, they've heard the cries of creatives saying that there's been little or no access to finance. People have a lot of ideas. People have created a lot of works that need funding for it to like go into the international space, for people to be able to see it, for it to gain recognition. But there's been no money to actually help to realize this. And then people have been saying, oh, that the creative economy contributes a lot. Like I think it's like in trillions now to the GDP of the economy. But even with that, people can do more, and the people can increase this. But I mean, people abroad, people in the international space won't be able to see these things if the creatives don't have access to actually push their work forward. So that was where the CFI initiative came from. But however, there are some challenges with the fund, and then one of them is that the implementation framework suffers from lack of certainty and uniformity of documentation requirements for loan applications. So the wide latitude granted to each of the PFIs to determine the documents or information to be required from a loan applicant leaves too much to the discretion of the banks and may throw up transparency issues in the process. So this CIFI fund doesn't necessarily state that, okay, everybody that's applying for a loan should have this document. What it does is that it basically leaves it to the discretion of the particular PFI, that's the bank, the commercial or microfinance bank you're applying to. So if, for example, if a creative goes to Access Bank can say, okay, come with a business plan, come with a proposal, come with evidence of your payment of your annual returns, your tax record, and some other things. And then the same creative another creative goes to like a GT Bank, and then GT Bank is saying, okay, in addition to that, also come with this and this and this. So basically, it leaves there's like an issue of no uniformity. So basically, one creative is like, maybe he has all his documents and he's like, oh, okay, it's easy for me to apply to Access Bank to get all these things. And then the other creative is like, okay, let me go to GT and then try to see how I can get these documents. And then the whole process is just very strenuous and is not very seamless. So that's like the issue that it creates. It would have been good, or it would be recommended for the CBN to state out in the initiative or in the fund rather, that okay, all these creatives that are going to apply for each subsector, these are the requirements. So everybody that even thinks of applying for the fund already knows the things to get even before going to the bank. So it makes it easy. So when you get to the bank, you're just like, oh, I have all my documents, these are the things I'm applying for the funds. I don't need to go through any other rigors or bring in this additional documents or do all of this. Everything is just settled. So that's an issue. So basically, it throws up transparency issues in the selection process. Some people might think, oh, that the banks are trying to, like, they're not being transparent, they're trying to favor some creatives over the others. There's also the issue of that the focus subsectors do not cover all the segments of the creative industry. Like Chinasa had mentioned before, the creative industry goes beyond the movie, the music, the fashion and the IT subsectors. There's like the art sector, and then the arts is very into performing arts, visual arts, there's photography, there's dance. There are other areas that that this fund doesn't look into. And then basically what it does is that the other focus subsectors that the fund doesn't look into basically just leaves them hanging. So what are they meant to do? Like now we've even seen that the performing artists and visual artists now, from like performances in like international festivals and exhibitions, it has given Nigeria a name. So like you have plenty popular visual artists and performing artists that have basically contributed to making people outside Nigeria know that, okay, Nigeria actually is a very, they actually like body in the entertainment industry. They are doing a lot of things in arts. They're doing a lot of things in other sectors. But if the CBN is limiting the access of funding to just these 4 focus subsectors, so what happens to the other subsectors that actually have a lot of things to put out, actually have a lot of things to for the international space to see. So that's like a loophole that needs to be addressed, and that, yes, that really needs to be addressed, and that CBN has to consider with respect to this fund. And then the last challenge that I highlighted is that the framework does not provide any timelines for the implementation of the scheme. In other words, there are no stated checks in place to ensure efficiency of the funding process. Since this initiative came up in 2019, we haven't really heard of any creative that has actually gone to the bank to apply and has successfully been granted the fund. Literally, we just heard, okay, in 2019, they were putting this forward, and at the time there was some buzz, and then literally that was it. We haven't really heard anything. We don't know now if the scheme is actually fully in place. We don't know if people have actually, like, there has been success stories, there have been success stories rather, of people that have actually gone to apply for the scheme and have been granted it. I mean, I feel like if there have been people that come out to say, oh, okay, I applied to this bank and then I submitted this document and they granted me the fund, I'm meant to pay within this period, it would also encourage other creatives to go and apply for the fund so they can put forth their work and basically let everybody know what they're doing. But now there's really no, like, this initiative doesn't provide that, okay, there's like the timeline is like, okay, within this period to this period, we're going to implement the scheme. These are people that have been granted the scheme. These are people that are yet to be granted but have applied. There's literally nothing, no data basically about it. So we're now not sure about it. And then the whole process of applying is a bit strenuous. It just seems like they have like a lot of things to bring, like to submit, like rather the creators have a lot of things to submit, and literally nobody's hearing anything about it. There's no news, there's no story around it. So there's literally some confusion as it is now as to what is really happening with the initiative. So yes, those are the challenges that we've been able to highlight with the CIFI fund. So I will hand over to Chinasa for the remaining parts of the presentation. Thank you.
Hi, Chinasa. I don't think you're speaking, but you're on mute. Chinasa, you're on mute. I don't know if you're speaking.
Sorry, that's it. So I just want to speak on legal representation. Okay, Semi has done a good job talking about some of the challenges that we face in the space, and in particular with reference to the CIFI at the CBN fund. But you know, we started this conversation by talking about the regulatory framework for the creative space, with particular focus or reference to Nigeria, you know, and I mean the Nigerian jurisdiction. And we also talked about, you know, some of the opportunities in the space, some of the challenges that we face and all that, you know. But all of these things all go to underscore the importance of having good legal representation, you know, along the line. And in my experience, dealing with creatives, a lot of times you find that they have gone ahead with whatever thing they have. I mean, this are usually a bunch of people that are quite talented. They're passionate about what they do. They have this great talent, or, you know, very creative and all that, no matter what industry it is, whether it's fashion, you know, visual arts, or, you know, performing arts, and so on and so forth. And there's this passion that goes with, oh, I want to just express myself. This is how I feel about this. This is my expression of what's going on in my head, or my creativity and all that. And most people just run into it and start doing it. They enter into agreements with people, whether written or unwritten, and, you know, along the line, they hit a roadblock, or they start having some issues, whether it's in relation to funding or in relation to performance or in relation to, any other thing, And so for me, as a legal practitioner that has dealt with so many creatives, this is me saying that it's very, very important to have not just legal representation, but good legal representation meaning people that understand the terrain, people that have information about it, and that can advise you from the get-go. The usual argument against that is that, we can't afford so and so lawyers because they're probably going to be expensive, or no, my brother is a lawyer, I can just speak to him and he'll go over my agreement or my contract and all of that. But it goes beyond that, And so the role of a legal practitioner in the creative industry cuts across a lot of things. There's legal advisory, there's a negotiation, meetings, drafting, ADR, when you're trying to settle certain issues that may come up without necessarily going to the court, regulatory compliance. And that would also involve things like ensuring that you're paying the appropriate taxes, if there's some money you're supposed to remit to various bodies, maybe government regulatory agencies and all of that. Your lawyer would handhold you and ensure that you do the right thing, particularly when you're negotiating with other parties in the space. We talked about contracts, and apart from the IP laws and other laws that you may need to take into consideration, the main thing is the contracts that you sign, because there are so many contracts, no matter the kind of contracts or kind of creativity or creative that you are, And again, because legal issues can be very unfamiliar, technical, confusing, and complex, what you would typically just assume it's the norm, or what you typically take the way things should be done, you find out that it will take a different legal connotation, in actual fact. And I'll give a very simple example, in relation to copyright. And, we had said that copyright is one of the most important laws governing the space because of the IP rights involved. When under normal employee-employer relationships, right, where someone, the general rule of the law is generally to the effect that if an employee creates or comes up with something during the course of his employment and all that, and maybe using the facility of the employer, and during the time that he should be engaged at work and all of that, whatever he has gotten belongs to the employer. That means the general rule and under employee relations and all that, In the field of copyright, it's totally different. Under Nigerian law, whoever creates something or comes up with something owns it, is the inventor, is the creator, and owns the IP rights to that thing he or she has come up with. So, the only exception being that there is a written agreement to the contrary, or there's something written to the contrary. So even if I'm working for someone, no matter where it is I'm working, and I come up with, some work, that qualifies for copyright protection and all that, if I don't have any written thing, that work belongs to me. Any written thing assigning what I have created or come up with to my employer, that will belong, and that's Nigerian law. But a lot of people don't know this, and then you run the risk of having a lot of people that you've engaged to work with you or for you, and then you think that you own the rights to whatever thing they've come up with, whereas you don't, because you don't have any agreement, either a clearly written IP assignment agreement, or maybe a letter of employment that clearly states that whatever IP rights are created will belong to you or revert to you, or even a clause in an employment agreement or something like that. You don't have anything like that. So and then when you discuss with some of these creators and you're trying to explain this to them, it's like, no, I employed her, she works for me, or she, and things like that. But that's not necessarily so. So legal issues can be very unfamiliar to some of these creatives. Some of them can be very technical, some of them can be complex, they can be, confusing. And particularly when you're now dealing in, activities that involve a lot of money, and all that. Now, it's one thing, like we said, to even be able to access the funding, but then when that fund is even accessed, to be able to make the right decision and to how to use, how to spread, and so on can become a problem. And so you need good legal representation, to ensure that you make the right decisions. Again, is the issue of, I talked about some of the laws that govern the space. And then I just want to again underscore the importance of other laws that may not necessarily be stated, but that would still be relevant. So for instance, as a creative, what happens when, are you able to will your what you have created to your head? Can people that are coming after you, that would succeed you, make profit from what you have done and all of that? So people also need to be aware of, the importance of having wills, succession in the space. What happens, and might not necessarily even be your director, it could be just someone else that is, taking over the business from you. At what point are you, transferring rights to another person? And some of these rights that you have can, serve as the basis for very, very serious, Semi talked about exploiting your IP rights. Okay, and she talked about licensing, assigning and things like that. You would need, it's important to understand what you can assign and what you cannot assign. So and a good understanding of copyright law would also help you. And again, I believe a lawyer can help you explain that further. So in the field of copyright, which is also relevant to what we're discussing, you have the economic rights and then you have the moral rights. Okay, the economic rights, as the name suggests, just clearly the issue that has to do with money. Your finances, what you get paid for, maybe royalties or things like that for what you have created. But then there's also the issue of the moral rights in what you have, in the work. The moral rights would cover things like the right to be mentioned as the person who came up with whatever product. For instance, the example I gave about you assign it where you've already created a work and then you have a written agreement where you've assigned the work that you have created. The issue of being mentioned, that even if you have assigned the right, what you can assign is your economic right. You still retain that right to be mentioned as the creator or the inventor, as the case may be, of whatever product or work it is. There's also a right for whatever you have done not to be for not to be spoiled, or for someone not to remove from what you have done. So you let's say you're a painter and you have some religious affiliation and all of that, and you've done a very beautiful painting and all that. Even if you sell that painting to someone else, and obviously they say that you're the one that painted the painting, you have the right to stop someone else from using it for porn, for instance, or using it in a pornographic movie, or using it, or maybe even interposing some other pictures or objects on the painting that you have already done. So under copyright laws, you cannot assign away your moral rights, okay? Even though you can waive in a sense that, okay, don't mention me. There's some agreement saying you don't necessarily have to always mention I'm the one, but you can never at any point in time now say, oh, this painting that was done by Da Vinci is now regarded as being done by Chinasa because it was assigned to me or it was sold to me or whatever. Those moral rights continue in perpetuity. Okay, so the point I'm just trying to make in giving this example is that you also need to understand what rights you have and what rights you don't. And even when you are acquiring rights in the space, you need to understand what rights you are acquiring. You can acquire the economic right to a picture, for instance, the economic right to a movie and all of that, but not necessarily the moral right to same. Okay, so these are issues that will keep popping up along the way, and that's why it's very important to have, like, first of all, the general overview of what the legal issues are, but beyond that, also have good legal representation. So beyond knowing the money matters, beyond knowing the fine matters of how to do your accounting and negotiate and things like that, you also need to be able to understand what's going on as far as legal issues are concerned. And I think that's where I'm going to stop today. And then maybe as we go ahead and go along with questions and all of that, we could deal with any other issues that have not been addressed. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you so much. Thanks so much, Temilola, rather. So, sorry, just okay. So thank you so much for the session. Very much, let's switch you. Things. Like I generally understand the existence of some laws that govern relationship between practitioners and other practitioners or the fields or to get to opinions. However, I would like to open up the question and answer. And please, if anyone has a question, just raise your hand or put a comment in the chat, and I'll call you. But I want to first take my own question. So I want to first take it off from what you said about representation, right? I mean, I'm one of those people who has believed in using what you have if you can't afford what you need. So, like, yes, my sister is a lawyer, and my sister has been the one who reviews most of my contracts. Like, I don't sign any contract without sending it to either my sister or a couple of friends who I also engage, who are lawyers, who are practicing lawyers, in that sense. And that is understandable because I do believe personally where I am, I cannot afford what it takes to have a lawyer on a retainer. I can't afford what it takes to have a law firm. And there are also few law firms in Nigeria that have focused on the art and the creative industries, like your firm. And I personally don't think I have what it takes to be able to have a firm like yours representing me in situations like that, especially in little things, I mean, things I consider little things, for example. So, and that is why people like us go to our sisters, our brothers, our friends to help us go through our contracts and what I do. But if we are to take on more legal representation, that means isn't there like more to be done from the legal perspective? Isn't there more that we can call the legal perspective to task on, like the legal industry rather, the legal institution to task on in order to ensure that more creatives, and it's also one thing to talk about creatives like filmmakers, fashion designers, and musicians, because those are like the, how do I put it, the fancier end of the creative spectrum, right? They are the ones that are much more accepted in the pop space. They are the ones that are considered to be more bankable, so to say, because I mean they can be easily be influencers and what like you and whatnot. But imagine a painter in that sense who needs legal representation. The person might not be able to afford what it takes to be able to do that. So are there things we are unaware about that law firms or Nigerian Bar Association or life are putting together in order to ensure that more artists come into this fold and are able to be properly represented?
Okay, thank you for that question. I would say this, right? I'm a legal practitioner, and I'm the only legal practitioner, well, in my immediate family. So obviously, if my siblings have legal issues, they could reach out to me. You know, it's natural. I mean, and it's not something that is far-fetched. Okay, and really, I understand why would I go and hire someone or pay someone to review my contract when I have someone who could do it for free. But the issue for me is a lot of times we take certain things for granted. So I'm a legal practitioner and my area of expertise is intellectual property law, right? That's what I do and I've done for donkey years, right? If I take, I mean, and that's not to say that I cannot, advise on some other areas of the law, but I wouldn't put myself out as an expert, for instance, in oil and gas law. Okay, so if you have a transaction or you have something that has to do with oil and gas, I may be able to give you elementary advice on it, but not, know everything there is to say or, give you, I won't be the best person for you to be speaking to. And that's where I'm coming from. Okay, the fact that so-and-so person is a lawyer or has just graduated from the university or has been called to the bar or qualified to practice in New York or whatever doesn't necessarily mean that that person is the best lawyer for you. And for us in Nigeria, that's what we find people do all the time. Most people just feel, you know what, And sometimes it's not even a matter of you can't afford the lawyer. It's just the fact that, oh, why would I go to another lawyer when my sister is a lawyer? Why would I go to another lawyer when my friend is a lawyer? He can look at my agreement and that's it. But your friend may not have had all the experience to be able to, envisage certain things, look at certain clauses and no, they're going to have some problems with this clause or this is wrong. In fact, what I see a lot of times that people just go on to the internet and print out some agreement and they use it for, and then it's so sad because sometimes you printed out an agreement that would work in a civil law jurisdiction, but will not work in a common law jurisdiction. And then you enter into that agreement and you set yourself up for failure. A lot of times you might be lucky because maybe the relationship might go smoothly, but you don't know what's going to happen along the line. So that's where I'm coming from. But having said that, I also want to say that, in particular, there are a couple of firms I'm aware of, and in particular, my firm, of course, Banwo and Ighodalo, who also have I would call it like a special program, for creatives. Because we realize that I read off a couple of statistics in the beginning of this conversation, and we realize that it's $1 billion industry, and beyond even, yes, like you said, it's mostly the music, the film, and all that people recommend, but even beyond that, there's a lot of money in this industry, and so we realize that we want to play in that field, but we also want to handhold a lot of people that don't understand the opportunities that they have. It's a big industry. And for Nigeria in particular, there's been a lot of focus on oil money, a lot of focus on so many other, and at the point they're going to agriculture and so on. Recently, I read in the news that about 75% of the agricultural products that were exported from the country were found not to be, fit, were not acceptable and all of that. So all the hype about agriculture and all whatnot, I'm not saying that nothing can be done about it. I don't know about the veracity of that report, but I'm just saying that it's high time we look inward and look at the creative space, look at how to harness it, look at how to make profit from it and all of that. But to do that, people, like, I agree with you, lawyers have to be able ready to maybe take. There's some echo.
Chinasa, are you still there?
Yes, I am. There was an echo, which I was trying to sort out. Okay. So lawyers, really need to be willing and ready to, work with creatives. And to do this, they're obviously going to take a pay cut, because particularly for, people in the visual arts and, like the music and film industry, you may not see the big bucks immediately, right? It's something that would come eventually. And there are a lot of lawyers. My point is, there are a lot of lawyers who are willing to do this and who are doing this because we see the big picture, not just the small. But people don't really know, and which is why a platform like this is really important. It's critical because people need to know that, what, I am able to. There are people that are out there that I could actually reach out to who will be willing to, provide some services to me and all that. It's a different thing where there's a big transaction that's going to go on. But in terms of even preliminary advice and all that, there are such firms and lawyers that exist. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah. Yes, it does. And I also hope that going forward, more is done with regards to, opening up space for more visual artists, and even beyond the artists, practitioners who are not artists, like curators and like. So my next question is actually for Timmy, and it's in regards to the CIFI fund. I'm a little bit familiar with this fund because some years ago, about 3 years ago, about 2 years ago, when it was launched, I was interested in I was working with someone and we were looking at the possibility of opening up a studio, but it wasn't a production studio per se. It wasn't like a film production studio, an IT studio, but it was more like a space where visual artists could come from time to time and do some work if they need like space and that kind of thing. And we thought about seeking this funding, only for us to go through the list of industries, and we see IT, fashion, media, and movies, and it was very discouraging. And it seems as if once again, the visual art is left behind. It's like the bastard child, the black sheep of the art industry. Is there any way artists and art practitioners, is there any workaround in which they can use to access this fund at all? I mean, also considering, like you said, very few people, if any, have actually had access to the fund. Is there any way we can actually cut across that?
I would say that for now, like I mentioned before, firstly, I don't even know of any of the creatives under the sectors that are covered that actually successfully. I mean, there might be, but I mean, we haven't really heard of stories of people that have actually really gotten it. For visual artists that are not covered under the under any of the four subsectors, I mean, they're going through the initiative. It doesn't even state that any other creative outside the that fall outside the four focus subsectors can access it. As of now, I'm not sure there's a way that, I mean, other artists can go around it. I mean, it would just be something that we'll probably have to, I don't know, have a discussion over with the CBN to, I don't know, just see how it can be reworked. I don't know, it might be that for the fact that we haven't really heard about it, I've heard the cries of other creatives that have complained about not being able to gain access to it, and then maybe that's why we haven't really heard about like timelines for the implementation and all of that. But as of now, I don't know of how other people can actually, other artists or other creatives can actually access the fund. So it's something that we'll have to like sit down and have a discussion with them to see how we can rework it. But for now, I don't know of how that can happen.
Yeah, thank you. So, still on you, talking about, you spoke about some of the lapses of the law. How do these directly impact the ability of visual artists and creatives in order to produce? Because on one end, what we're trying to do with all this session is also try to make people aware of their financial ability. Like if they can, if they haven't, their ability to tap into a financial side not to ensure sustainability. But if the provisions of the law are mostly for media-related, tech-related, oil, agriculture, and likes, and the one thing that it seems like the CBN has done for the creatives is also very ineffective and very limited in scope. How do you see this impacting the ability of art practitioners and artists in the Nigerian space to, truly be free?
Sorry, I didn't really get the question. I'm so sorry. It was cracking.
Yeah. Oh, sorry, pardon.
Yeah.
So I was saying, given all the lapses the lapses that you stated that exist in the Nigerian legal framework, and given the limitation, the very, very huge limitation and scope of the CIFI fund, and also given one more time that this whole event is built around helping art practitioners and artists understand how to tap into the money side of their creativity. How do you see all of this affecting this set creativity of art practitioners and artists? Because in my opinion, in my humble opinion, if I do not have protection from the law, then I am easily enslaved by anyone who has more resources than I do in that sense. And yes, there is protection, but there seems to be very limited protection, and more importantly, enforcement of this protection, if I'm right. So what do you think, how do you think this impacts the artists, and what do you think can be done to improve this?
Okay, firstly, I'd like to clarify. So there are two things here. There's the law, which is the Copyright Act, that regulates literary, artistic, dramatic, cinematographic, broadcasting, and sound recordings. So if you're speaking of the law actually protects artistic works, which visual artists fall under. So basically, the Copyright Act protects. I mean, it makes provisions for artistic works insofar as the original is fixed in a definite medium. It's fixed in a definite medium, and then there are other conditions. So basically, artists are covered under copyright. And then when we're talking of finance, that's the other side of the That's the CIFI fund that you're talking about. And then remember you asked about if some other parts of the creatives have more resources than you, how does it affect the artists? I believe that's the question you're asking. Yes. So I believe that, these situations, I don't think I feel like aside from the CIFI fund, there might be other ways to actually gain access to funds. This CIFI fund is just something that has, it's a government initiative. Artists can look into like private sector funding. You can, visual artists now or other creatives that are not covered under the CIFI fund. If your area of expertise or your area of being a creative doesn't fall under the CIFI fund, I feel like you can basically, that's why, what Chinasa mentioned, you can come to a lawyer. What we've done in the past is that some artists that are not necessarily looking to go and get access to funding from the CIFI fund. Maybe they have some projects, or it might be a movie, or might be something else, and they have some projects that they want to finance. What we do sometimes is that because we are a big law firm and then we have access to some people that may be interested in investing in projects, depending on what it is, we sometimes basically create like a bridge between the artists and between the people that might, or potential investors that might be looking to invest. I'm just saying that the CIFI fund is not, I feel like artists shouldn't be closed-minded and just rely only on the CIFI fund. If the CIFI fund doesn't work, there are other opportunities that you can explore, like looking to get like private investors. I believe that, there are people out there that you might not necessarily know of that are actually open to investing in projects that are not even necessarily movies and limited to movies and music and fashion. There are people that are art enthusiasts. There are people that like visiting exhibitions and and are really interested in these things, but people don't really know about them because the only fund or the only initiative or the only way they think they can get money is majorly from the CIFI fund. So I'm just saying that, there are like an array of opportunities, there are an array of mediums or mechanisms in which creatives can actually gain access to. And I believe that creatives should look into private sectors and not necessarily limit themselves to the CIFI fund. Thank you.
Thanks. So, Chinasa, I just have two more questions. Beyond Nigeria, because we have been focusing more on Nigeria, and the goal is also to look beyond Nigeria. Are there legal frameworks, aside from the article of the law, are there legal frameworks that you are aware of that exist that does protect artists and creators in the continent? So
I would say that beyond Nigeria, which is where I have expertise, I'm aware that, and I had mentioned the thing about international treaties. Okay, so international treaty is like a convention that certain countries would either sign on to become members of and ratify in their local jurisdictions. And by that, there's you create obligations for other member countries and all that, where you recognize the rights of the other parties. Examples are the Berne Convention, which I had mentioned. There's the treaties on audiovisual rights and all that, some of which are administered by the World Intellectual Property Organization and all that. So to that extent, I would say that there are international conventions that ensure the protection of these IP rights or copyright in different types of creative work. Okay, I also believe that different jurisdictions, depending on the countries and all that, would have their own specific laws, governing the various people in the space, various creatives in the space. So to that extent, yes, definitely. Okay, and then I had wanted to just add something to what Timmy had said regarding creatives and their access to funding and all that. Like she explained, this CIFI fund just came up as part of the government's way to support the industry, and as Nigeria seeks to diversify into other areas and all of that. But that's not, I mean, prior to the fund, it doesn't mean that people were not doing stuff or were not getting fund and all that. Yes, like we rightly pointed out when we're talking about the challenges, it's not very easy. It hasn't been very easy. Sometimes it's all other, but then there have been ways, creative ways in which this has been done. And again, this still underscores the importance of having a good legal representation. So for instance, the issue of, the focal areas of the fund and all that, yeah, I'm not, without saying that you want to break the law or, avoid the law or something like that, there could be creative ways in which what you want to do could also fall under, the purview of the fund. So let me give you an instance. If it's an exhibition, nothing stops you from enter into some sort of strategic partnership or some sort of joint venture with a movie or so, or someone that is in that industry, or, and in that way you would still be eligible for the fund because there's some part of it that is covered by the fund. I don't know if you get what I mean. So, I mean, there are different ways that you could look at these things. And then in terms of funding, again, Timmy had given the example of how we have worked with certain parties in the past. Although these were mostly people in the movie industry who wanted to raise funds, were able to introduce them to investors, like you said, acting like a bridge, to be able to introduce them to investors. On the one hand, they have people that were looking for, what's the next, thing I can invest in, some private equity firms, some individual investors that are willing and ready to, invest. And then on the other hand, there are the people that wanted to, carry out this project, either a movie project or something, and didn't have sufficient funds for that. So even without recourse to the CIFI fund, they were still able to achieve their goals. So to answer your question, yes, there are a couple of international, treaties and, local laws in other jurisdictions that would address these issues. And then just to support what Timmy had said in relation to, funding and access to funding. Thank you.
Yeah. So my final question is a bit putting you on the spot. If visual artists watching or listening to this tomorrow needs legal representation, can they come to them? And this is considering that these are mostly early career to mid-career artists who don't have money, who don't have, like, I'm not even going to say, got their finances. If they need legal representation, is there a channel which a firm can provide such support? I know I'm definitely putting you on the spot, but I mean, since I have the
okay, yeah, I mean, I don't know if the screen is, I think we'll stop sharing the screen. But when I shared my screen, I know that I talked about the services that a lawyer or a legal practitioner can provide. Okay, we talked about legal advisory, talked about negotiation, meetings, talked about, I think, drafting, ADR, regulatory compliance. I mean, there are other things like litigation, there's registration of IP rights and all that. Of course, we are open to having, these creatives meet us, come to us, and there will definitely be stuff that we can do for you. We can provide legal advisory. We could even, in certain cases, we could act, pro bono in certain cases, but there are certain things that obviously will not be able to do, pro bono or at no cost. Or
like what?
Like litigation, it depends on the kind of litigation you're going to have, there are things that will be cost consuming and all of that. But I guess for me, the main takeaway, and for you too, the main takeaway should be that you shouldn't be afraid to approach a legal practitioner, like my firm or a legal firm like mine, to have a conversation about your IP rights. At the very least, we could point you in the right direction. We could give you preliminary legal advisory. We could give you, we could let you know what your rights are. There could be a few things that we could do for you, at the start, or even at a very cheap cost that you wouldn't even have imagined. Because like I said, there are two things. We're interested in the space, and we also recognize the potential in the space. Okay. So it's not right to just close the door and feel like, oh, I can't talk to Banwo and Ighodalo, I can't talk to Chinasa, I can't talk to this person. You need to take that step, because after all, what do you have to lose? It's in your interest to protect your rights. Okay.
All right, thank you very much. I would definitely steer anyone who is looking for pro bono representation your way. That is what I'm taking out of.
That's not what I said.
No. That's what I'm taking out of that. Any artist who is pained about a contract related, I'll just like, oh yes, I have this for you for free. Just mention my name. Thank you so much for your time. I don't know if anyone has any question. I don't see any comments or questions. So yeah, and we're kind of on time. So thank you again, once again, Chinasa. Thank you, Timilola, for your time, your knowledge, and for being generous and gracious with us. Look forward to engaging you more in future, as in one way or the other. I would also like to say thank you to thank you. I would like to thank you to Quad Derby and former organizer of the last festival for supporting us in order to bring this to life. But this is the kind of ultimate session for this series of events. This series, the last session will come up next week Tuesday, same time, and in that session we'll be looking at fundraising and financing in the arts. Like we have gone through the investment market, through the legal end of things. Now, actually, we want to look into tips that practitioners and cultural institutions can take while seeking fundraising, while seeking funds within the art space. We'll be having Debbie Cooper from Quad Derby as a facilitator, and I'm sure it's going to be a very, very rich session. So thank you once again, Chinasa, and thanks for spending time with us. And see you sometime soon in the office.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Bye.
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 Thanks all.
Thanks.
Thank you guys.